Good morning, everybody. This is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast, and I am excited to once again have another great guest on the show who is going to bring some motivation, inspiration, and education. Let me introduce our guest for today. This is Mike Sawyer, who was born in Miami, Florida, who now resides in Gainesville, Florida. He's married to his wife, Jennifer, and has 3 children. All are martial arts trained. His daughter, Annika, who is now 22, was in the top 10 nationally in NASKA, black belt creative forms, for 6 years during her teen years. Mike graduated from Miami Central High School, graduated University of Florida with a bachelor's in clinical nutrition, Florida State Law School, and co-founder and managing partner at DeCarlis and Sawyer, PA law firm since 1994. Black belt in several different martial arts with over 52 years of training. He's a PKA board member, NASKA co-founder, ISKA Entertainment co-founder and president since 1994. Co-founder of ESPN ISKA Strikeforce Kickboxing, co-owner US Open ISKA World Martial Arts Championships, ESPN on-air commentator for ISKA Strikeforce Kickboxing, US Open, and K1 Grand Prix. He's currently working on some projects, co-founding of the ISKA NASKA Pro Sport Karate League for 2024 and co-management of Sport Karate World Rankings for Black Belt Magazine. Try to get that all in there, but wow, what an awesome bio and a ton of accolades there. Mike, I am so honored to have you here on the show and talk with you today. So thanks for being here.
You're welcome, Jason, and I'm the one that's honored. I've followed you on LinkedIn, and I've heard your name in many places, and you're doing a fantastic job. I mean, it's really hard. I know what it's like putting together media like you've done, and it's way more than it looks on the surface. And I really commend you for what you put together.
Thank you so much. And as I said, as we were talking a little bit before, this has really, truly become such a passion project for me, because what a great way to highlight positive role models and influencers in our martial arts industry and other industries, but just to give people the opportunity to tell their story and share their successes, as well as sharing their failures and obstacles that have helped us to catapult back into that success again. So, Mike, what I would love to hear from you first is just what is your motivation behind, having such a huge impact in the sport karate world?
Well, I think as a child, it goes back to that. I think much of what we're about is formed and becomes our basic psyche when we're children, and our biggest influences are then. And we learn all our lives. We learn facts, we learn skills, but how we're emotionally and psychologically built is I think, very much a young age thing. I was very fortunate. My parents stayed together. I wasn't from a divorced family, which I think sometimes is tough on people. Sometimes it doesn't make a difference. But my father was certainly my biggest influence. I always saw as a leader. He ran his own businesses. Uh, to me, he was a father and a mentor. And although he died relatively young at 65, I think about him every day. And I always think, what would my father do in this situation? And when you got that kind of a mentor behind you from a young age, then I think that really helps. Other people don't have that, and they do bigger things than I've done. So I don't think it's a necessity, but for me, it was an extra pleasure, as well as significant in my life.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I love hearing that, how much of an impact our parents have on us, and good or bad. Sometimes the influence that our parents may have on us may teach us what not to do, or what we don't want to travel that path.
Sure.
Like you, I was fortunate that almost all of my friends growing up came from a family that mom and dad got divorced, and I was so lucky that my parents are still together to this day, both still alive, and have had, a tremendous impact, especially in the fact that, even though I knew that my parents had trouble from time to time, whether it be financially or just relationship. But the fact that they're still together and that they were able to stay together and work through that, that's taught me a lot about relationships, with my own wife, with my children, with friends and other family, that, there's going to be tough times and we got to work through those things. And so they have been a really big example. But watching some of my friends, like you said, some of them were affected, some of them were not, but at the end of the day, there's still an impact overall. And I love that you said that, your dad was a leader and a mentor. Can you tell me a little bit more about what he showed you as a leader and a mentor to help you become the person that you are?
Uh, I think it all comes down to belief in yourself and confidence. And he always taught me to believe in myself and to follow my instincts, to always, and martial arts kind of came into this too, always stop before you say or do anything. Think about it first, think rationally. Once you say it or you do it, you can't take it back. And there's always a way to do what you want and get things, if the things that you want in life, if you're willing to listen to other people, find out what it is they want, and compromise.
Mhm.
And I was fortunate to, from 14 years old, I worked at his business until I went off to college. And I think that character and values are what really come out of a childhood. Character
Mhm.
and values. And I think that we absorb those, whether we know that we are or not. And I think it's a really valuable thing. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes, as you say, sometimes people don't have that, and they are determined to not be like that their parents were. But in my case, I look at his picture sitting on my desk every day, and I say, what would my dad do in this situation? What would
Mhm.
he be proud of me doing or not doing? And there's been some decisions that I've had to make over the years, especially once the projects we were doing after PKA um, uh, was no longer, and we started ISKA, and we're going worldwide with it. There's different countries, dozens of countries involved, and sometimes I had to make some decisions where I looked at my dad's picture and I said, I would think, okay, would he be proud if I let this go? Or would he be
Mhm.
proud if I made this decision? So that's an effect that you have all your life. And you're not going to always have your parents, but you're going to get those values, you're going to get that character, and then you're going to meet so many people in your life that there'll be other people that you start to follow in the same way after you're an adult.
Mhm. Yeah, when you were talking about how you would think about decisions that you made, things that you were going to do, what would my father think? What would my father decide? I often think, I can remember being a young man and always going to my dad. Every time I made a decision, I would always go to my father
Yeah.
for that. But Dad, what do you think? And now, um, I think so much about what would my kids think? How would my kids view
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
And will my children look at me and say, my dad made a good decision. That's the example that I want to follow, or what would my dad think? I try to live up to that kind of expectation for them. Uh, so that drives me in a way, the same way that it drives us when we're looking for our fathers or our parents' approval and permission, and their buy-in as well.
Yeah, because
Tell
Jason, we're doing that for our kids now. So, you and I both, all fathers, all mothers, they're doing it for their kids now. They're helping develop character and values.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Tell me more about your childhood growing up in Florida. I'm on the West Coast. So I'm over here in
Yeah,
California. You're on the opposite
right.
side of the country. Just tell me, what are some great memories that you have of being a child, and things that you did, hobbies, things that you love to do as a kid.
Well, my dad always kind of directed me towards sports, and that was a good thing because sports teach you a lot of things. They teach you teamwork. They help you, enable you uh, to accept not always getting the result that you want, but always looking forward towards the next opportunity and
Mhm.
putting behind you, but learning from losses. to help you accomplish wins. So that all was good for me. And through high school, I played football, soccer, baseball. I was always on team sports. And at 16, I had a friend who wanted to go to a karate studio. He'd seen a demonstration. I went with him. He quit after 2 weeks. I kept going. And I saw, wow, this is something that goes one step further. All of that motivation and teamwork you have to bring out in yourself in martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm ready for that. I'm ready for the next step. And in doing that brought me a whole new level of feeling of accomplishment and opportunities and a feeling of confidence about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just something I wanted to have for my whole life. So, to me, there was never going to be a time when, in '77, I got my black belt, Shodan, and there was never going to be a time when I was going to say, hey, I used to be a black belt. It was always going to be me. I was always going to be it. And I would never stop training, and hopefully I never will. So that's how I got into martial arts, and it's a little different than most people do. Most people start as kids today,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, it couldn't have worked out better. It changed my life completely in a positive way. I wasn't going down a bad road, but I had there was so much to be done and could be done that it opened up doors for me. It's kind of like when you decide that you're worth it, the universe opens doors to make it a reality.
Mm-hmm.
But you gotta do it. You can't think about it. You have to just go. Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever did.
Yep. That's true. That's true. Well, you started martial arts at 16 at an age where, I mean, I look at, like you said, most kids start, like I started when I was 10, and I started because my mom wanted me to do martial arts. Most kids that come into my martial arts school start because, mom and dad want them to do it. But you started because a friend had started and they invited you to the school. Is that what happened?
Yeah, he wanted somebody to go with him, and
Okay. So you
so
started together.
we started together in
Yeah.
Miami Beach, 97th Street, in the Nisei Goju system under Frank Ruiz. John Giordano was my instructor. He and I are still in contact today. Uh, and for me, I was just taken with it, like almost immediately. To me, it was the mental, psychological, physical combination that it just fit for me. It's
Mhm.
what I wasn't necessarily looking for, but when I found it, it just hit me right in the face. And I said, I want these skills. I want this mental discipline. I want it for the rest of my life. And things were very different back then, as you probably can guess. And I mean, there was no kids in the classes. It was all adults, mostly men. And you know, I, my first sparring match was a week after I started classes. We went to the first tournament I competed in. I'd been there for 2 months. So, Sensei Giordano said, well, you've been here 2 months, Mike, it's time to go compete. So that's how things were back then. A lot different
Yeah.
than now. Now it's a much more refined process. I think karate studios have just gone to a level that I think no one could predict that they would go in sophistication. I mean, everybody knows about the best ones. People know about your studio all over the country. I mean, it's just it's a different thing completely, the same as sport karate has gone.
Mhm.
And and I fortunately was able to be involved very much in both competing and after my competition career in sport karate. So.
Yeah. Now you were involved in team sports mostly as a younger child before you got into martial arts. What were some of the main differences or how did team sports prepare you for martial arts, and how do you think martial arts helps prepare kids for team sports?
Uh, well, I think the team sport is a little bit of a misnomer because there's always a leader. There's a leader in everything. And Little League Baseball, when I was 12 years old, there was somebody on the team that everybody looked up to that would take a leadership role. And it's important for any project in any business. And it's important for a little league team, even. I mean, you look up to the coach, but there's always a player who
Mm-hmm.
is the leader. And I realized early on that that was always going to be that way. Jason, leaders are dealers in hope. And whether it's on a little league baseball team and you're trying to win a game, or you're starting a new company and you hope it's going to be successful, you got to have a leader. And they're the ones that give you hope to do anything. So, all of that in the team sports, I saw where I could contribute to a mass success. It also led me to the idea that you've got to have people to have any kind of success in any project. You need capitalization, you need a good idea, and you have to have people. If you don't have one of those three, then it doesn't work. So I saw what my role was on teams that I competed on, and I saw how it was important that everybody understood and was able to fulfill their roles, and that there needed to be a leader that would inspire those people on a daily basis and could be approachable.
Now, you started martial arts at 16. At that time, there was, you said not a lot of kids, almost all adults, but you still at 16 are not quite an adult. How did that affect your confidence, being 16 and training with these grown men and being thrown into sparring and competition very early on? Did that help boost your confidence, or did it kind of make you remain humble for a while before that confidence really blossomed?
By definition, martial arts is a humbling experience, because when you start, you realize how little you know about, uh, well, lack of putting it more bluntly, how little you know about fighting or defending yourself in martial arts. You don't really understand for years how the psychological and emotional benefits are going to stick with you lifelong. But one thing you do know is that once you get into a martial arts class, you realize you knew nothing about fighting, nothing. And and so you start to build skills that give you confidence in a physical way. And as guys are that's kind of what they do when they're young, is they do a lot of physical things. Women do too. And back then it was mostly guys. And I was the baby of the class. So for me, though, I said, I've been on sports teams where I was the baby. I was the freshman in high school when we had seniors. And so it doesn't bother me at all. What really matters is, how I embrace this. My mission in life isn't just to survive, it's to thrive. And if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to thrive at it. So let me throw myself into this. I want to. I want to do it. And so for me, it was no problem at all. And again, I go back to my childhood background. I I saw my dad build his businesses and everything he did, and I mean, he didn't care if someone had tried to do the same thing and was unsuccessful. He just said, "We're going to make this happen," and that's what would happen. So I just was in that pattern, and my very first sparring match, my very first tournament match, I went into with complete confidence. And all through my competition career, I kept that. It grew with me, and I was able to use it as top competitors do today, where you really have a conversation with yourself before you go out there in that fighting ring, and you say, I'm the best that there is. They should just give me the trophy now, spare everybody else the embarrassment. And if you don't have that kind of confidence, you're not going to be a winner. You don't always win, but you sure have a better chance if you really think you can.
Yeah. Well, that winner's mindset is definitely a game changer. I mean, you watch anybody that walks out on the stage, and you can almost tell immediately from the eye contact to the bow to the posture on how this person is going to perform, and whether they're a real performer competitor or not. So yeah, that's a huge mindset, and like I said, a game changer. So you started competing, right in the beginning of your martial arts career, and I'm assuming that you just kind of continued from there. Tell me a little bit more about your experience as a martial artist and your time as a competitor?
Well, shortly, let me see, in Miami, a couple of years at Nisei Goju, that school closed down, opened up further north, and I had a Shotokan school with Kenji Sugimoto, who was a Japanese instructor, Kenkojuku Shotokan in Miyashi system, and I started studying Shotokan. And after a couple of years of that, I moved up in rank, but I still wasn't a black belt. But it was time for me to go to college. So I moved to Gainesville, began at the University of Florida, and I met my instructor, my current instructor, the very first day. He was teaching in the phys ed department. There was a karate course for credit, and I was his first student. And to this day, he's one of my best friends, and he's still my instructor. And uh, I was studying Wado-Ryu, which is a sister style to Shotokan. Shotokan and Wado-Ryu are really the two original Japanese systems. And so it was an easy transition. And I started competing right away. He was a competitor too. And we would travel to tournaments. And, with each belt rank that I would go up, I would learn. And I remember after I got my black belt, my first three tournaments, I learned a very good lesson, which is seeing is not always getting the whole picture. And where I had just blown through brown belt ranks and I thought black belt's going to be the same, nobody's going to touch me. I realized that at that level, when you finally are in black belt divisions, you're dealing much more with a mental and physical game of chess than you are just raw skill. And so after I'd lost my first three matches as a black belt, somehow just one day it started coming to me, and it was almost like I couldn't lose. Um, we had opened a karate school in Gainesville. It was thriving. We still have it. Myself, Mike McCoy, Corey Schaefer. And so I would split my time between teaching, training, weekends going to tournaments, and that was really my life. And I would go to University of Florida classes too in my spare time. But one thing about me that I don't know that this is something. It's certainly not something I would say I'm proud of, but I've noticed that it is kind of consistent among people that think the way I do. I hated being in classes. I don't remember ever studying in high school at all. I graduated from Miami Central High School, and I had a very high SAT score. Without that SAT score, I'd have never gotten into the University of Florida. But that got me in, and I thought, well, now I'll become a real student. So that lasted about 2 weeks, and then I was back to working out, training every day, every night, teaching, and going to classes. The minimum number of times that you had to in order to graduate. And I would just study the night before the tests sometimes. And just to continue on with the school part, because I know that that's my other life. I really do, Jason, live two lives as a lawyer, kind of really at a level that I never planned to practice at, but now I'm there, and my martial arts life. So it's two lives. It's a busy day. Uh, but after I graduated, we were still running the karate school, and all through the 1980s, competing. I decided once we had acquired the U.S. Open from a friend of ours who was a smaller tournament, but we got it and we said we're going to build this up to become the biggest martial arts event there's ever been. Mike McCoy and Corey and I, we worked on that, and once things were going well, once we'd gone through the PKA period, once we had started ISKA, NASKA, co-founding those, then I thought, well, I'm going to get a graduate degree. And my attorney at the time said, why don't you try the law school admissions test? I'd signed up for the GRE and for, all this, thought I would get an MBA maybe. So I took the LSAT. I scored very highly on that. So University of Florida said, hey, we'd love to have you come here. So I'm in law school and I'm working at the same time. And I thought, well, now I'm going to become a real student. And that lasted about 2 weeks. And I was back to teaching and training all the time. And now I was traveling. I was at least twice a month. I was in an overseas country. Our headquarters overseas was in Geneva, Switzerland. I was back and forth there. And this is in the 80s. We were just, spreading sport karate and the ISKA organization we put together all over the world. And I would sometimes have to call my professors. I called from Moscow once and said, look, I'm not going to make classes tomorrow. It's just, I'm a long ways away. But I would study the night before the test. And in law school, your entire grade is your final exam. So I graduated fairly high in the class, passed the bar on my first try. And so you could look at me and say academically, you were successful. Well, I think what really matters is where you are at the end of a journey. So I guess you could say that, and my career as a lawyer has been distinguished, but the way I went about it was unconventional, and I don't recommend anyone who's listening. I really don't recommend you do it the way I did it. I had a particular plan and pathway that made it, and my patience for sitting in classes and listening to professors drone on. I just had a hard time with that. But I think that school is where everybody needs to get their basic learning, have their basics from. Whatever they do in life, what they learn in school will help them. And these days, you also don't have the benefit I had back in my day of scoring high on tests like SAT and LSAT, and that being your entry into schools. They're looking for very high GPAs. And so, my story on all of that is it may be unconventional. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but it was me. And Jason, you got to follow your own path.
Right.
I mean, you can't be anybody else. Everybody else is taken. So
Right.
you got to be your own person. And that was me.
Yeah, I'm listening to you talk about school, and I was exactly the same way. Sitting in a high school classroom, sitting in a college classroom, I would much rather be on the mat training. I opened my school at 19 years old. I was teaching as a teenager, and so for me that was really hard. And now I have children of my own, 21 and 18, and all I ever tell them is, look, just because I did it my way doesn't mean that that's how you have to do it and that it will or will not work for you. I said, but what I will say is going to school is going to give you a layer of extra opportunity that maybe I may not have had or someone else may not have, without that. So, because I think both of my kids are going to school because they think that's the thing to do. That's what they're supposed to do. But I also try to remind them, look, it's all about opportunity. Create every opportunity, meet as many people as you can, talk to your professors, talk to the instructors, because at the end of the day, really, I think when it comes down to opportunity, it comes down to relationships. The relationships that we have provide these different opportunities. These doors open when we meet people at the right place at the right time. And that's just, what I found in my life as well. But yeah, I often start a lot of my presentations when I go to school, telling, I'll go to a high school and say, listen, I couldn't stand high school and I couldn't wait to get out. And I bet there's at least, a half dozen of you that are sitting in the classroom thinking the same thing right now. And just so you know, just because you're feeling that doesn't mean that you won't be successful. Don't let anybody tell you what you can or can't do. Just get out there and chase after a dream. So, just hearing that from you, it is unconventional, but we all have our own path. And here you are, successful in your areas of your life and things that you've chosen to do. And I think that's amazing. And you mentioned earlier, going back to the karate schools, how karate schools are so much more refined now, that the systems and the curriculum and everything's so much more defined. But in your early years of training, things were very different, right? I mean, not nearly as refined. Touch on that just for a minute.
Well, it was, there wasn't anything for those instructors in those days to follow. They were part of associations. My rank is from U.S. Eastern Wado-Kai Association and from Wado-Kai American Karate. I was recognized as a mastership from Niseido Ju-Jitsu. All of these organizations people are part of, and and all of those titles that you get, all the different belt ranks and things like that, they they're only measuring sticks for hopefully where you want to go. And so other people's decision that you have become successful at something and granting you something, while it's gratifying, sometimes it's more for their journey than it is for yours. You've got to have in mind what it is you want to do. The great use of life is to spend it on something that will outlast you. And to me, that was always what my life journey was going to be about, was to something that I was interested in, that I could easily be obsessed with if I didn't keep myself under control, was sport martial arts and karate schools. And I rewrote the whole curriculum for the Wado program that we were doing at our school here in Gainesville. And it just needed that kind of organization. The difference between the school I went to, it started in 1970, and the schools that are there now, and our own school here in Gainesville, the difference is just completely night and day. Of course, it's karate has become one of the teen activity sports, which is good, and so many of the students are in that zone, the activity zone between 10 and 11 and 17, 18. But in the early days, here's a round kick, practice it at the end of class, we'll switch to something else. It was just very basic. And the forms were basic, traditional forms, Okinawan and Japanese in my case. In Taekwondo, it's Korean. But there wasn't anything like the opportunities now that kids have. With the ISKA, with the Worldwide Circuit, NASKA here in North America, we have so many kids come in at the amateur level, and some of them make it through in their later teens to the professional level, and they're in those divisions. And the things that they're learning in the schools, and the things that if they are if they have extra interest and they have extra skills, they're creating new things in martial arts that we only dreamed of back when I was a student.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember watching the US Open on ESPN years and years and years ago.
25
Um,
years we've been on there. Yeah.
and then so if you're thinking back to the beginning and then you're thinking what you see on the show now, wow. I mean,
Yeah.
the creativity has gone through the roof. I mean, it used to be that a flash kick would be a big deal, right? Or
Yeah.
working a weapon smooth and quick was just enough. But now, just the talent and the skill that so many of these athletes have, it's so amazing. And even at a young age, at the 10, 11-year old age, you're just blown away. And then you watch them kind of go through their career to the adult ranks, and just watch how they mature and grow. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I came from a very traditional background, Tongshido system, very traditional. We actually really didn't compete a whole lot at all, and we really didn't have a lot of weapons in our curriculum. So it was always the wow moment when you saw something like that, when you saw the XMA start, and then the hyper programs and Raptor and all these different curriculums, adrenaline that you see that are now fostering these skills, right? And so before we go down that road and talk about that portion, let's talk about the beginning of the ISKA, NASKA, US Open, and how that all kind of went together.
Uh, the first kickboxing group was Professional Karate Association, and
Right.
Joe Corley and some partners out in Los Angeles owned that. They asked me to be on the board of directors, and I was a rules committee chairman. And I remember Joe was the leader, really. He was very passionate about it, and he still is to this day. And and ESPN had just become a 24-hour sports network. So the world was changing in terms of sports and how sports were going to be delivered to the consumers. Cable television, ESPN, we have 24-hour news with CNN, we got 24-hour sports. This will never work, was what I heard mostly from people in the business. Oh, it's never going to work, have 24 hours. Well, it did. And
Mhm.
ESPN became a behemoth, eventually sold to Cap Cities, then eventually sold to Disney, although Hearst Corporation still owns 20%. But the PKA was the first organization, and it worked very hard. It went through some changes, and finally the partners decided not to stay together. And Joe Corley went on with a different group. I was one of the top promoters of events. Did my first, Mike McCoy and I and Corey, we did our first event for ESPN at the O'Connell Center here in Gainesville in 1981. That's how far back it goes. So once I saw that the PKA was, not going to go any further, it was really just a North American group. I thought, well, it's time to pick it up and just go further. And now got more freedom to do it. So myself and the top promoters, we just said, let's come up with another organization and decide what we're going to do. So ISKA is a name that just hit me one day, and I mean the proverbial, sitting with Mike McCoy and Corey and drawing it out on the dinner napkin. That's exactly the way it happened. Here's the logo, and it's gone. But then you've got to, to bring credibility, and you've got to bring something new to that. I mean, it's very important when you're growing a business or you're thinking of a startup or anything that you always are thinking ahead. And I mean, it's called being a visionary. And visionaries always are thinking down the road. They're thinking, okay, this is the way things are. How can we make things be? And you don't always start with an end in mind, because for visionaries, there's never an end. But you see a point in the future, and if you've got that clearly in mind, then the way to get there comes to you, or it comes to one of the people that you're working with. I have never wanted to be a lone wolf type guy. I've always wanted to surround myself with people I trusted. Uh, Corey Schaefer, Mike McCoy, and I, Scott Coker, we've all, we've been partners for decades. And so, the vision was we're going to spread kickboxing all over the world. And right now it's, we've had some fights over in Europe. It's all opening up. The Berlin Wall was starting to fall at the end of the 80s. Let's just go grab it. Let's just go do it. So it came to me to be the traveler at first. And for 15 years, I traveled millions of miles. I don't know how many different countries. And now the ISKA sanctions or regulates over 800 events a year, somewhere from Thailand, China, and Japan to Ukraine and Moscow, which isn't happening right now, of course, because they're in a war, but all over Europe, all over South Africa, South America, Australia, all those tournament circuits are there, as well as kickboxing, as well as MMA. And this year it may hit 1,000 events ISK is involved in. But at that time, my thought was just, how do we keep the sport going and how do we move it forward?
Mhm.
Everything in sports is built around stars. So who are the top fighters? That's who we have to have on our shows. Where are locations where we'll have a great effect? I went to Paris and met with Canal Plus, which was Europe's new version of HBO, a pay TV satellite company. Made a deal with them. And the next year, I got a call from ESPN, 1991. No, I was 93, I think. I was in law school still, I remember. And they said, we're beginning ESPN2, and we've got to fill a lot of hours of black. So how many kickboxing events can you get us? And I think we did 36 or 40 the first year. And so, now we've gone from spreading the sport around to these different countries and the promoters there that are promoting the events to having a worldwide audience on the biggest sports brand that's out there. So it was quite an opportunity, and we named it Strike Force Kickboxing. It was mostly Scott Coker and I handling that part, Mike McCoy handling the tournament side, because we had also co-founded NASKA along with Larry Carnahan, Joe Corley, and some other big tournament promoters in 1987, so that there would be a sanctioning body for tournaments as well. And so we were working the U.S. Open here in the United States. We were working ISKA worldwide, working with television networks. One of the problems we had at ESPN was apparent right away. Nobody knew anything about the fights except for me and a handful of other people. So I had to agree to do commentary. So that's how I started doing commentary on ESPN. I had no experience in broadcasting, but I had two things that helped me. The three things. One is I knew all the fighters. I knew all the fights they'd had. I could just talk off the top of my head about their skills, where they fought last, what country, who they fought, who they beat, what their background is. Second is I had a lot of friends in martial arts I'd met over the years, and I could bring in people who were also experts. You know, on the first pay-per-view we did in 1994, Don Wilson did it along with me. And the other advantage I had is I had a really great producer, and still do. Here, 40 years later, Kevin Cusick at KC Productions used to be a staff producer at ESPN. He went out on his own on good terms with ESPN, and he's been the producer for literally, Jason, hundreds of shows that we've done in the United States, in Europe. We were in Bangkok, Thailand for a week doing shows out of Lumpini that were, an American and European team against the Thai kickboxers there and Muay Thai. So, to make it doable for me, I had to put those pieces together. And then having Kevin as a producer, he's got an earpiece in your ear like I have right now, when you're doing the show. And Kevin would just coach me as I do the commentary. And he would get on me. Mike, you're still talking about the roundhouse kick that staggered that guy 30 seconds ago. Call the action in the ring.
Right.
Don't call the action in the ring. And so it took me really years before I could watch myself on television on the replays on ESPN and not go, oh God, please, say something intelligent for a change. But that's
I feel
how
the same way sometimes.
Well, but it was by necessity that I was doing it. So, and then in 1998, after Disney bought ESPN, they also, along with ESPN, they bought ABC, and so they wanted us to expand the events that we did at the U.S. Open, and I started talking to them about breaking. We decided to start a whole breaking divisions and make that a sport. So that's become incredibly popular. And if you've watched the shows on ESPN over the years, I'm sure you've seen breaking. It's just an eye magnet. It's what we call in the TV business evergreen. People will watch it over and over and over again. So
one of my favorite divisions. I mean, I remember watching Chip Townsend, and he was always one of my favorites. Just to watch. So I got to jump in and just ask. All of these things going on, right? I mean, there had to be some kind of major learning curve, though, right? Because I mean, you kind of jumped into each one of these opportunities from doing the promoting to starting the leagues to doing commentary. How did you overcome the learning curve of just getting started?
Today's accomplishments are, I don't really go by sayings and follow, the 7 things you do to be. I really don't follow. I read those books. I think they're great, but I don't have any real following. But there's good advice in what people say sometimes. And I remember a saying that it always comes to mind that yesterday's impossibilities are today's accomplishments and realities. And so I thought, the only way that that becomes true is if somebody believes that it can, and they they do what needs to be done to make that happen. And it doesn't matter, what it is. It doesn't matter if it's Alexander Graham Bell on the telephone. It doesn't matter if it's the Manhattan Project in World War II. There's got to be somebody who believes that it can happen. And usually, there's a visionary who is looking at it and saying this is going to happen. Steve Jobs, making the personal computer, and then saying, okay, well, that's done, and and getting fired from Apple because he said, we already done that. I'm thinking about combining your computer with your phone and having a screen on it and being able to download music and being able to watch video. And he had all those visions, and his company was like, look, Steve, we make computers, we have shareholders that we're responsible to. But that's what a visionary does. And they tend to think that they've got that vision and other people don't. And most of the time their vision is stronger. So that's how a visionary works. They can't do it any differently. And one of the best advices I had was, make sure that you know what you're doing, know where the hard points are going to be so you're not surprised by them, and surround yourself with the right people, the people that believe in the project as well. And get leaders that are involved, that work with you, leaders that can have people follow them, because that's what most of the population does, is they follow leaders. And I mean, as was said in a movie, I think The American President by Michael J. Fox, was, in the absence of real leadership, people will follow anybody that steps up to the microphone and starts talking. So if you're going to be a leader, be a good leader, make it in something good, and make it something you can be proud of. So I just said, guys, we can do this. We can make this happen. And the motivation was there. It's what I wanted. It's what they wanted. And I will freely tell you that without the people that I've worked with, it would never have happened. I mean, there were times when they were right and I wasn't, and I had to be ready to say, you're right and I'm not. Let's do this instead. But that's how you get where you're going. But you always have to have confidence that your part you can make work. And you have to, if you're going to be the visionary, you've got to look down the line and say, I'm never going to be satisfied with the status quo. So even after we get to this, I'm going to want something new and different, and I have to be ready for that. And I tell people too that are in that position, I tell them, look, you have to build a following, you have to build interest and confidence, and by God, always think big. You got to think big. Thinking small plans do not make anybody's blood redder. Doesn't make anybody's heart rate get up. Doesn't make anybody get more interested. If you're not thinking big and you're talking big, you're not going to have people get excited. So make big plans. Make big plans and carry them through. Yeah. So that's how it happened. And by the end of the 1990s, we had the U.S. Open on television. We had events. We were just supplying ESPN with events constantly. Canal Plus over in Paris as well. Other networks that our events were then funneled onto after they were shown for the first time on ESPN. And we partnered up with the K1 group out of Japan for the 2000s and did a bunch of shows out of Las Vegas. And the K1 Grand Prix we would do out of Tokyo. And so it was a very growing, very big time. And it fit exactly what was necessary for everything at the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Back to what you're saying about, not accepting the status quo and have, being a visionary and thinking big. I mean, really, isn't that the essence of martial arts too? Is that, we strive to achieve black belt, but really what we strive to achieve is black belt excellence and going above and beyond black belt, because no matter how far you get, there's more to learn. No matter how good you get, there's still, that growth opportunity. And so I think that, it's why
Yeah.
you've been so successful and why martial artists often are so successful, because that mindset of, continuous and never ending improvement, right? And I think that can help people in all areas, whether you're a martial artist or not. Is just not being satisfied with that status quo. And I often have people in my life go, you've done this. Are you happy now? And it's like, well, yeah, but I still have this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they
That's
go,
it.
well, when is it enough? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. I don't know if it's ever enough. I mean, am I satisfied? Do I enjoy my life? Am I proud of my accomplishments? Yes, but why sit back and wait, or why sit back and celebrate all of those past accomplishments? I mean, how long can you celebrate your past accomplishments if you're no longer accomplishing anything else, right? It's,
Yeah. Well, Jason, I mean, you've got the blessing and the curse. You have it because you had the vision of what you're doing right now. You had the vision of your karate establishment. You had the vision of doing this podcast, but you're not satisfied with the status quo. I mean, every day you're thinking, how can I reach more people with the podcast? How can I expand that business? What can I do with that? Well, let's open a school in this area. How can I make the curriculum better? You're constantly thinking of that. I mean, I can see it in your face, and I can hear it in your voice when we talk. Whether we're on here or we're talking privately, you and I can see it. I mean, you're a visionary, you're a leader, and like it or not, you're stuck with it. So the only way that you're going to be happy is by accepting it and following that lifestyle. Otherwise, we would just be terribly bored.
Absolutely, 100%. People often ask me, so when you retire, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, why in the hell would I retire anyway? I already love what I do every single day. I mean, I get to do the podcast, get to do, martial arts. Why? Why? What's the excitement in stopping doing what I love? There's no excitement in that. And you're right. It is a blessing and a curse, because our brains, we just keep thinking, what's the next
Mhm.
step? What's the next thing? How can we improve this? I mean, one of the questions that I'm going to ask you at the end of this is always, to all of my guests, what can I do to better my show? What can I do to better myself as a host? What can I do to improve? And that's just, I don't know. I think that's come out of, the years of martial arts, of always driving to push myself to do more. And speaking of that, right, we were talking about NASKA, and we're talking about the
Mhm.
US Open, right? We're
Yeah.
talking about these competitors and just the level of skill that has just gone through the roof. Tell me a little bit more about, the future for NASKA, the US Open, and a new league that you have that you're going to be talking about.
Well, NASCA was intended to replace what really was not there. Renardo Barden, back when Mito Uehara owned Black Belt Magazine, he in the Karate Illustrated, the other magazine they had, he had ratings for the karate tournaments and all of
Mhm.
that. And we were new owners of the U.S. Open. We had moved it to Orlando. We had nighttime finals in ESPN and that. And uh, we but he left the magazine, so there wasn't that support anymore, and there just wasn't any regulatory body for tournaments. It was I don't know, this might be before your time, but it was black belt meeting in the morning, decide what the rules were going to be. uh, you know, the top rank, whether he really understood the rules and could do it or not, would run the ring, each ring. I mean, it was just a very old fashioned type of
Mhm.
system, for lack of having anything better. So the U.S. Open, the Bluegrass Nationals, the Battle of Atlanta, Diamond Nationals, the Compete, all those events, we said we've got to have something that's better, because these tournaments are growing. Martial arts here in the United States is getting huge, and it really wasn't the Bruce Lee movies. Everyone thinks that. It was the Kung Fu series that was on TV every week. And then when the Karate Kid came out, boom, now you're really, it's just going crazy. So tournaments were being attended by more numbers of people than ever, and they weren't ready. They didn't have the right divisions. They didn't have the right rules. So we all got together and said, North American Sport Karate Association, that's what it's going to be. Larry Carnahan has always been the president of that. The U.S. Open has always been a signature event on that circuit, and it's U.S. and Canada. Has been the area, North America, and that's really the practical area for it to be. It's an amateur organization in that there's some prize money paid, but it's not like the prize money that a pro organization would pay. But the people have pro skills. So as the as NASKA flourished through the 80s and into the 90s, and we got into the 2000s, and we were on television, it became apparent that this sport is being accepted by people worldwide. And, my vision was this is going to be a pro sport one day. Once they get to the skill level that it can be supported by non-martial arts viewers on television, now you've got a professional sport. So they just got better and better. One of our best competitors, Jackson Rudolph, the most successful weapons competitor of all time, he does bow staff. He's now retired, but he works with me on the world rankings for Black Belt Magazine, and he's very active on the circuit with the Paul Mitchell team and that. I remember one event where after the day after it aired, I remember Brian Queter at ESPN calling me up and going, that guy Rudolph, it's got the green stick. And I said, oh, yeah, but the bow staff? And he goes, yeah, I mean, that guy's unbelievable. And, he's got he tosses it in the air, catch it. I mean, he does these strikes and I mean, he's got a string attached to that, right? And I said, no, Brian, he doesn't have a string attached. He actually tosses it 30 feet in the air, catches it behind his back without looking, and goes right back into striking and blocking. No, he's got to have something. Look, it's martial arts. You want to call it magic, but it's real. And so me being the way my mind works, I thought, okay, now how can I get Brian Queter at ESPN to be, spreading that back to John Skipper, who was president at the time? How can we, and at the same time, I called up Kevin Cusick, Jackson Rudolph, and I said, from now on, when you're on the U.S. Open, when you're on television with ESPN, we are going to refer to you by a nickname, Jackson. You're going to be called the Magician. Jackson the Magician Rudolph. So that's what we did, and so there's just so many stories like that. But it's an open sport, so there's traditionalists. I mean, with the very best stuff. Ariel Torres, who got a bronze medal at the Olympics. Joey Castro, who's the current ISK world champion. Those two have battled it out over the years. Ariel was the world champion. Now Joey's the world champion. The world championships that we hold at the U.S. Open, that's the part that's on television. And it's for the professionals. And the tournament is got 1,300 divisions of competition, counting exotic divisions like the breaking that you love. Those divisions, those world championships, sport MMA. We're adding Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu divisions. It's going to be about 1,500 divisions in 2024. And people have always said and asked me, when are there going to be more of these? And one, we waited until the competitors had gotten themselves to a level where they really were peaking out. They'll still get better. But our athletes in the performance sports like forms and weapons, I'd put them up against Olympic floor exercise people any day. The fighters, I wouldn't have had a chance back when I was fighting against these guys. I mean, they're so fast. They've advanced the skill so greatly that we're there. It's time to have more than one event on television and to really approach mainstream sponsors. Our in-industry sponsors have been tremendously supportive to us. Paul Mitchell Organization, Century Martial Arts, I mean, I can go down the line, tremendous. Female Fighters Matter too, all of them have been very supportive. We're with a league with 6 events during the year. We'll come up with a catchy name, maybe Samurai 6 or something like that. Kind of like tennis has a Grand Slam. But we're going for a season between March and October, and we're looking to do 6 events next year for television.
Wow.
Television is a little different now than it was. Everything is moving towards streaming,
Right.
and you can be on multiple streaming platforms.
Right.
We still have a loyalty to ESPN, and we still have our event down at Disney World. So we're very connected in with Disney and with ESPN as a priority for us. But for next year and for after that, the ISKA Pro Sport Karate League is going to be changing the top level of sport martial arts for the better, I think, of everyone. It's okay. So it's a passion for us. It's the next step in the vision. But for those athletes that can now make a real living, be able to stay in the sport, and for the promoters who have, when you got a local event, you get local publicity. Now they'll be getting national and international publicity for their events. That's gold for a promoter.
Yeah.
And while the public really is interested in the stars rather than the event, still, I mean, it's it turns it into a different level of business and provides opportunities for new promoters. So that's what's coming up with that for next year. One of the streaming groups we work with, that George Chung, who's a former champion on our circuit, owns Jungo TV. They're a streaming platform, and our event goes out on there too. He has bought Black Belt Magazine, and so Black Belt has a new 45 years later, has a new role of helping support these things. So every month, every year, Jason, something falls into place. And it falls into place because you make a place for it. And then it happens. Like I said, the universe opens doors.
I love it. Well, this is an exciting time for sport karate, but martial arts as a whole. I think that the more that we have, sport karate on TV, and I love the UFC, always have loved the UFC, but to have something that kind of has a broader spectrum of that encompasses all of martial arts and being on TV and being on ESPN, these several events. I think this is amazing. I'm super excited. So I can't wait to see what happens and how it blossoms. And, I just want to thank you for being on the show today, and thank you for sharing this with me and sharing your experience and just some of the stories from, like all martial artists love to talk about, because we could probably do martial arts stories all day long. That's our favorite thing.
Sure.
But
that's something that, when you have time, you and I over dinner or something, when I'm out in California, or you're at the US Open, we'll talk, and there's some great stories, and there's way more to come too.
Well, and maybe we'll have you back again on the show in a roundtable format, where we could have some of these competitors like Jackson Rudolph or Caitlin Deschelle, or whoever we can get on the show, and we can all just kind of chat about some of the stories and some of the evolution of sport karate. I think that would be a lot of fun as well.
Well, I hear a visionary talking.
Right? And then always thinking of that next step.
I always think of the next step. That's you, Jason.
Well, hey, Mike, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today. Stick around for a minute, and thank you to everybody who did watch live and will watch this later. Would love to remind everybody to please go to YouTube and subscribe to Master Motivation Podcast. But for now, Mike, one more time, thank you so much for all of your insight today. Thanks for sharing the stories, and hang out for a minute. We'll talk for just a bit. All right, guys.
Thanks again. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Thanks again, Mike. And guys, thanks again for watching. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.